Today, pairing with an edged weapon. What's the best way to do it? Edge, flat? Easy answer. Next. Jeff Tsai, Forte Swordplay. So today, let's talk about this thing that kind of comes up in conversation every once in a while. If you've got an edged weapon and you're looking to parry to defend, what's the best way to do it? And there is a simple answer to this. So let's start with the simple thing and sort of unpack it. Maybe two pieces to it. Number one, parry in whatever way keeps you safe. Okay, so under pressure, be safe. That's the biggest thing. That being said, if you can keep your wits about you, what you want to do, very simply, is take your edge and put it against the flat of the opponent's blade. Anytime. Anytime you can make that happen, that's the way to go. That being said, so there are a lot of reasons for doing that. One of the challenges of using a sword in reality, regular use, trying to avoid real life notches like this. We've got a 16th century period Dusak here, and you can see that, under historical use, edge against edge contact happens. And I think it's an important consideration, which is kind of why I go back to the original point. You have to parry in whatever way is necessary to keep you safe. So even under the best circumstances, if I really am trying to get that edge against the flat, and we'll talk about why that's the best in a little bit, even if you try to do that, over the course of time, I guarantee that you are eventually going to get damage against the edge. Over time, there's nothing to do other than to resharpen or eventually repair the blade or replace the blade, right? So that being said, I've heard opinions where people kind of say, well, since it's inevitable, just lean into it. If it's got to be edge to edge, you use it, you use up the blade, and you move on to get a new blade. So sure, that's perfectly fine. And as a swords person, any excuse to get a new sword, awesome, great, right? But at the same time, I would like to minimize the number of swords that I have to purchase. And so from a preservation perspective, there are ways to use the blade intelligently to minimize the amount of damage, to mitigate that damage, right? So edge on edge, if you have to, you have to, and it will happen. So to minimize that kind of damage, over time, we turn to physics. Let's turn to physics. So if I grab another sword here, got another blade to come up against it. If you were to look at the cross section of any blade, so if you're looking at this cross section, and sort of difficult to see with blades, especially blunts like this, but you would be able to see that there's basically a cross section where you've got, obviously the edge is thinner, and the rib, the spine of the blade gets thicker, and there can be different profiles. But at the end of the day, you've got something which is thin on the end, thicker in the middle. And so because of that very sort of two-dimensional profile, anything that is this way, any sort of pressure this way, is where this will bend the easiest. Anything that comes this way is going to be strongest in terms of what's good for the blade. And part of the reason that there are different profiles for swords, you may have heard of things like grooves or fullers that are put into swords. And so that sort of groove effectively can turn a blade into sort of almost an I-beam kind of cross-section. And one of the reasons to do that is so that, again, anything where it's taking force this way, very, very strong, that's a really good way to actually make a really sturdy cutting blade, for instance. That being said, so if we know that sword blades are really stable with force against the edge, and really least stable, the most likely to actually cause a blade to bend, with force against the flat. Just goes to say then that if I'm going to apply pressure against a blade, I don't want to do it here edge on edge. I do want to do it here against the flat, and I want to do it along the profile of my sword that is the strongest, right? So my edge on the sword's flat, my edge against the flat. So edge against flat, number one key thing to remember, but even more so, instead of just doing a very perpendicular kind of action against the blade, which does work. The other thing to remember about swords is that a lot of people, modern HEMA, like to do a lot of point forward thrusting kind of actions, but swords are also clearly designed to cut, right? And especially depending on the kind of sword like this, some of them really want to cut. And so when we factor in using the sword as a cutting weapon as well, when you have the advantage to actually cut against an incoming attack, you want to take advantage of that, especially for parrying. So when you come in, when you cut, you want to, again, get that edge against the flat. Almost like shaving. Think of it like shaving. Shave down the blade. Or even shave up. Shave up the blade, okay? So here's the thing. When you try to see that in real life, and you can look at a lot of the videos that we do, Crumpow is a really good example. It can actually look like you're actually parrying with the flat. And again, it's hard to see and hard to show on video. And even in person, honestly, the best way to do it is to actually do it, two people, one working on trying to do that kind of technique against the other, to actually be able to feel that sort of shaving contact. And again, that's the sort of thing that's kind of outside of the scope of this video. But the key point remains, edge against flat, if you can, and edge against the profile of the flat. Shave along the flat, if you can. There's your answer.